Good evening, students. So we are at the end phase of your syllabus, and from this point, we study about the new topic, that is NoSQL. And from this point, you feel that this course is different from the normal DBMS system. So that's why its name written as a applied database management system, right? So whatever we discuss, that is the traditional or conventional method of storing the data, right? So we discuss about the data and then database and DBMS and RDBMS, right? So agenda of this lecture is NoSQL. Why, what, and when we will discuss today. And the characteristics of NoSQL databases and aggregate data models. So as you know, data is what organized collection of the data, or we can say that the collection of interrelated data, right? And DBMS is one of the software which is used to manage the database, like creation, maintenance, and another task. Right? What is the purpose of storing the data? That is, we want to store it, retrieve it, manage it. So the brief history of the database management system. So in 1970s, it starts with the COTS relational model, and there is a lot of progress there from that point until reach at the 2020. We are having a lot of options for storing the database. We are having a lot of software like Oracle, Postgres, Sybase, DB2, Aster, Vertica, Explosion, VoltDB, right? So these are all are the software which are related to the RDBMS. Okay, and other side we are having a lot of software which is related to NoSQL. So benefit of relational database management system, which we already discussed. So it is designed for all purpose, right? That means we are using to design for the library management system or enterprise management system or any type of system we can design. It follows the ACID properties. You know about this very well. And it have what? Strong consistency, concurrency, and recovery, right? I'm talking about the relational model. It is having the mathematical backgrounds, and it supports the structured query language. It's a typo mistake. Standard, it's not a standard, structured query language. And lots of tools to be used, like reporting services, entity frameworks, like all these are the benefits of database, relational database. And you can see that these are the examples: MySQL, SQL Server, SQLite, Oracle, In the RDBMS, the data is stored in the form of tables, and tables are interconnected, right? Now question is NoSQL. Why, what, and when? So what is the current era? The current era is the distributed computing is there. That means the data is distributed and there is a use or large amount of data is there. But relational database was or were not built for that purpose. For what? Distributed application. So relational database system is not applicable for distributed application. And what is the current era we are having? That is distributed. So for the relational model, they are not so much applicable or flexible for the distributed application, because as you know, in the relational model, we are having the various tables. We get the tables after applying the normalization methods. And if you want to access the data from different tables, so what do? You want to use joins. So joins are very expensive if it is in the distributed environment. And it is hard to scale horizontally, right? As you know, how the table is scaled? Table is scaled only vertically, right? Is this clear? Vertically means
Yes.
we can store the data in that. That is vertically scalable only. But nowadays the requirement is so much regarding scaling. So this relational database system is not horizontally scalable. And it is very expensive, like product cost, hardware maintenance, that is very expensive. And it is weak in what? Speed, performance. As you see, when you load a Oracle in your system, so it gets slow. But the software is very heavy, right? So it's weak in that. Which one? Relational database, right? High availability and partition tolerance. That is very drawbacks of this relational. So why NoSQL now? Whatever we study, that is wrong? No, that's not wrong. Actually, that is the conventional thing and traditional thing through which your concepts are designed, right? You know the concepts regarding the database, right? But as per the current demand or as per the current trend, so we require NoSQL, right? If we are working for a small project and if we want to store the database, so simply we can use a simple concept of tables, right? And we store into the standalone PC. Now, if you want to distribute your data, right? So that case you require what? A NoSQL. So it's a driven or a driving trend is there. What are the new trends? Look at on your screen, big data. What is the meaning of big data? Yes,
Lots of data.
lots of data. So where you see the lots of data?
Sir, on different social networking sites.
Yes, nice, very good. So social networking sites like Facebook, Twitter, and
YouTube.
YouTube, we have the lot of data. So have you think of this thing that these are using the relational database models? No, right? So for that case, no SQL databases are used. Second point is connectivity, that is social networking, person to person knowledge, right? Concurrency, diversity, cloud grid. So these are the new trends, and in new trends, we are not able to use relational database model. Okay. So relational database model is lagging for the current trend. Is this clear? Then one of the
Yes, sir.
question mark is that why we study that? फिर हमने क्यों पढ़ा है हैं? Because we study because of it's a base core. Okay. So we must have to study that, and then we do further future trends, right? Right. So RDBMS performance is, look at this RDBMS performance for the relational database and requirement of applications, right? So if you are looking for the salary list, so at that time RDBMS is giving the highest performance. Okay. Even if you are using for website applications RDBMS, it will work. But when we want to work with the social networks or particularly location based services, so RDBMS is not fulfilling that thing, right? So it creates a lot of complexity. So highest performance will be there only if the small requirement is there, that we want to find out the salary, like we want to store the things, we want to retrieve the things. Okay, that time we use RDBMS. So what is NoSQL? So NoSQL is not only SQL. It's a not only SQL, and it is without SQL, right? So NoSQL database provides a mechanism for storing and retrieving of data that employ less constrained consistency model than traditional relational database model. So whatever the relational database model which provide the consistency in the things, that is not required in case of NoSQL. So NoSQL provides mechanisms for storing and retrieving data that employ less constrained consistency model, right? So consistency is more in which one? NoSQL or SQL based?
SQL.
SQL, yeah, right. Because as you know, this SQL or RDBMS follows the ACID properties, right?
Yes, sir.
So we do not want any type of consistency in case of social networking site, right? So at that time, NoSQL can be used, right? NoSQL systems are also referred as not only SQL to emphasize that they do in fact allow SQL like query language to be used. So it is using some query language which is very similar to the SQL, right? So that's why it is say like not only SQL. Now what are the characteristics of NoSQL database? What are the characteristics? So NoSQL avoids what? First thing, overhead of ACID transactions. I think you remember this. ACID transactions, ACID properties of transaction is in the relational database models. complexity of SQL queries, burden of upfront schema design. In case of RDBMS, what is to be followed? First, we find out the requirements, and then we design the ER model, and then we convert into the tables. So that is followed, and finally we get the schema, that is the table, right? So it does not follow any fixed type of schema, and the transaction are followed in the application layer, right? So there are various layers in the model like OSI or TCP/IP model, that is transmission control protocols. So that transactions are followed in that application layer of that, right? And provides what? EG and frequent change to DB, fast development. First thing, very, very important, large data volume. So it works on the large data set. As you see in case of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or this YouTube, you cannot imagine that in a second, few seconds, terabytes of data will be uploaded, right? WhatsApp. So for that case, no SQL database is used, right? That big data will not be handled by RDBMS, right? And it is
Yes, sir.
schema-less. There is no fixed schema in the case of NoSQL. These are few NoSQL databases like Redis, HBase, Cassandra, React, Tokyo Cabinet, Project, Membase, Neo4j, Scalaris, CouchDB, MongoDB. So there are a lot of NoSQL databases. Actually, these databases are designed by different companies for their own implementation purpose, right? So few of them we will study in, only one or two will be implementing, right? So I think an idea is clear. What is the meaning of NoSQL database? So what are the properties of NoSQL database? It has no complexity like ACID properties, like schema designing, like there is no SQL complexity we are having, like we have to use joins, then subqueries we have to use. No, nothing. The development is very, very easy and fast. And actually it is used only for the large data volumes, right? NoSQL when or when not to use. When we use it or when not to use it. Anyone who can tell about this? कब करना चाहिए, कब नहीं करना चाहिए? Anyone?
सर
Yes.
सर जब हमें लार्ज डेटा को स्टोर करना है तो नो एसक्यूएल यूज करना चाहिए, अगर हमें कंसिस्टेंसी चाहिए तो फिर नहीं यूज करना चाहिए.
Or anyone?
फिर अगर हमें रिलेटेड डेटा अपलोड करना है, यूज करना है, तो फिर हमें NoSQL यूज नहीं करनी चाहिए.
Yes, right. Related. Yes. Any other? Okay, when traditional RDBMS model is too restrictive. Our RDBMS model is very, very restrictive, right? Because of scalability issue is there. Scalability. And it is scalable only vertically. There should be the things which is horizontally scalable. So this RDBS model is not horizontally scalable. Do you understand what is the meaning of horizontally scalable? Horizontally. And ACID support is not really needed. What ACID do? What actually ACID do? ACID is actually ensuring what?
Consistency.
Consistency, isolation, and durability, right? So if it is not required, then we can use NoSQL. Because RDBMS is neither distributed nor scalable by nature. This is one of the big issue of RDBMS. Logging data from distributed resources. In case of distributed, it will not be very easy for dealing with RDBMS. So we have to use NoSQL. Like if we are using temporary data, like shopping carts, wish list, session data, then we have to use NoSQL. Data which requires flexible schema, then we have to use NoSQL. Flexible schema, like if you want to store the information of students, so what you do, you decide what attributes we choose for the student, like roll number, name, age, date of birth, course. So it is not flexible schema, it is static. Okay. But in case of NoSQL, it is flexible. There is a flexibility of the schema. You will see whenever we are going to implement it, right? When not. Financial data, right? Because financial data require what?
Consistency.
Yes, right. So financial, if so, we do not we have the trade-off. Trade-off means financial means it must be consistent. So trade-off we check for the RDBMS because RDBMS provide consistency, right? Data requiring ACID compliance, that is, and business critical data. At that time, we also not use this SQL, NoSQL, right? So this is just a introduction part of your NoSQL. So in this lecture, you understand why RDBMS versus NoSQL, what is NoSQL, why we study, or when not to use it, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
that's all for today, and we will discuss more thing in next lecture.